to live stream. Make co-host. There you go.
All right, ready to admit everybody?
Everyone else is still a co-host, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Except
Right. Except Ian. Here we go. Ian's now a co-host.
Yay! That just to include me, right?
Hi, everyone. We are getting everybody in, and we are casting. We're casting this time. We have a big announcement for the AMAs that we normally do on Saturday. So if this is your first time, very cool. Glad to have you. If this is, something that you've come to a number of times, also very cool, but there will be a little bit of a shakeup. So one of the things that we also do is something called Writer's Lunch. And it's a weekly educational event on Thursdays. And one of the things that we realized would actually make this easier for the people who tend to like our programming to access is to put it when everybody that watches Writer's Lunch is available. So we're going to make one of the AMAs, and we're going to test this out in the next few months. We're going to make one of the Writer's Lunch days the AMA that we're doing here on a Saturday. And that way we hope we can get you guys, answers to your questions, especially those of you who are on the Discord, and maybe want to be able to engage, but can't. I know a lot of us, either aren't here in Houston or you aren't even local to the country, and Saturday afternoons has not been beneficial to you because you're not around, or you have a hard time accessing the information on the back end, because most of the time these things aren't recorded or sent out to YouTube, and then we leave you unfortunately scrambling for answers because you weren't able to attend, or you have to ask us directly to answer your question again because you weren't able to find a recording that didn't exist. So oh, I'm so sorry, Susan. One of the good things about it going to Thursdays is that we already have stuff in place to stream to YouTube. So even if you aren't able to come into person, the beauty of it is we can be there for you later. We can just send you out the link. So I'm so sorry. If it doesn't work out, we will come back. Oh, I'm so sorry, Susan. Susan is not happy about this change. However, we're going to see if we're able to do the most good this way. And if it turns out that that's not the case, we'll pivot again. But we're hoping that this will be a positive overall kind of activity. And maybe we can find something else to do on Saturdays or on the weekends. Not promise anything, but maybe some other educational in-person stuff. Coming down the pipe.
For Susan, we can maybe find something. Yes.
But we're trying to open up our weekends for some other activities. We have some exciting things that we're talking about. Nothing that I can say specifically, but one of the first things to do to make that happen is make sure that we actually have the weekends available for these new awesome things. So, oh man, Susan, you're breaking my heart. We'll have to go back to the drawing board and figure out something else for Susan. But this is obviously on a weekend. So we are going to go ahead and talk today about questions we've received about grammar rules, specifically stupid grammar rules, or grammar rules people have heard that are not actually rules, and then also some rules that exist that are incredibly obscure, and all that jazz. But before we go too far into it, for those of you who are watching us on YouTube right now, because we are streaming this one, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves because we haven't done that yet. Sean, you want to start?
Well, let's do, as we're introducing ourselves, let's talk about, who you are, obviously, but then also what is a grammar rule that you see most often being committed? What grammar heresy is most often committed that you've seen as an editor?
The faux pas. Okay.
I was like, why are you putting me on the spot? And then I thought, commas. Oh my God. So many commas out there, and I am the comma murderer. I am a Sean Carroll, my editor with Tomeworks, my co-host of Writer's Lunch, and for the moment at least, programming director of Right Space Writing Center in Houston. I've enjoyed a year working with them, and hopefully on to bigger events as far as community organizing go, which I absolutely love. Yeah, so the grammar rule, or the obscurity of the grammar rule, that I really love is commas and readability. And it sometimes feels like there's too many commas and sometimes feels like there's not enough. But the specific rules regarding them, regarding dependent and independent clauses, it's a myriad mess of things. But also very fun to learn and very fun to speak out loud and see how flow happens regarding that, because commas can be something that really stop your reader in their path, or help promote understanding depending on how you use them.
Yeah. I want to go next because Sean talked about commas. I'll introduce myself first and then I'll get into it. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Anna Hawkins. I write science fiction and fantasy as AP Hawkins. I have a few short stories that have been published in various literary magazines and anthologies. I'm of course, an editor with Tomeworks. I specialize in science fiction and fantasy editing. My grammar thing. So I am very much a comma vibes person. I think a lot of the rules surrounding commas are kind of stupid, and I think the most important thing when you have commas is the flow of the sentence and how they impact the sentence flow, and how if you were to speak that sentence out loud, where you would normally put pauses generally is where you need to have a comma. But that's kind of yeah. So I like commas based on vibes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just said the comma rules, and you're like, oh wait, never mind. I like comma unrules.
Right.
Unrules.
That's why I wanted to go next. That's why I wanted to go next. I like commas based on vibes. But one of my kind of pet peeves is misused homophones. Affect and effect is one that I see a lot. And it drives me up a wall. So that's yeah, I don't know if that's like technically a grammar rule, but that's like one of my editing pet peeves is the misused homophones. Words that sound the same, but are usually spelled different and have different meanings.
I always love when I find a new one that I hadn't thought about before. Right? So like course as in like rough, and then course as in like my chemistry course, right? Getting that one mixed up.
Daphne, tell us who you are.
I am Daphne Strasser. I'm an editor with Tomeworks. I specialize in horror and romance, all those really visceral genres. I am also an author of those genres. Anyway, the thing I see most often is the comma. Well, I'll talk about my comma rule and then I'll talk about my em dashes. But the comma rule that I see broken most often is that when you have two independent clauses in a sentence and they're connected by a conjunction, you're supposed to put a comma before the conjunction. And I see that all the time. And I understand why, because I did not know that rule until a few years ago. I just don't think that's ever taught in schools as being like a rule. But the other one that I see all the time is people not knowing how to use em dashes specifically with dialogue. When you're using em dashes to indicate interrupted dialogue or action happening in the middle of a dialogue, that one is almost always misused. And that's okay because dashes are hard.
Ian, I know you're out here in the ether somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Everett, editor with Tomeworks, writer of the Mega Jewel series. And I mean, I feel like I'm guilty of more grammar faux pas than I am a fixer or noticer of them. One thing I've been seeing a lot lately, I've been in my own work and then when I review other people's work is ending a sentence like with a preposition, so like wording it in some way. Like I think we've kind of forgotten this rule where you're not supposed to end up with a preposition, like where are you trying to get to, or that kind of thing. And
Where
then
did
like
that rule even come from? Because the CMOS doesn't recommend that anymore.
really that's interesting.
I have things to say about that because it's racist. It was
Oh my God!
Is it really?
Ooh.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God.
But yeah, we'll talk about that. Ian, I'm sorry. Continue to talk about your, if you have anything else you want to add, because
No,
I'm
No,
getting
because I feel
excited.
like I didn't even realize that there was the racist element to this, so I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
if
the
I want to talk
origins and
about
it
it.
comes from the German and all that. Yeah.
I love when stupid rules turn out to be for stupid reasons. This is
There's
delicious.
Yeah.
there's one guy responsible for a number of stupid rules. But I'm going to do my introduction, talk about my stuff too.
Mhm.
Unless Ian, I apologize,
Nope.
I did interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Shannon Winton. I've been a developmental editor freelance for over a decade now. I got started into this. Started into this industry because I was in a critique group with a publisher who like pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, I've been using your labor for free and I can't do it anymore because it's not fair that you're not getting paid." And so that was sort of how I got into developmental editing. And then I had to learn copy editing along the way, which is not my natural inclination, but it's just something that goes along with it where, you work with a publishing house who's like, hey, can you do this as well? And I'm like, sure, I can. And then, you go learn about a bunch of stuff. But developmental editing is still the thing that I love the most. And as everybody who is here on the Tomeworks board probably knows, is that if you have a question, I will answer it, and I will go find you the thing in the Chicago Manual Style, or I will go find you the stuff in the Merriam-Webster. Or, Strunk and White is still a thing, but I prefer Dryer's English when talking about grammar. And I've realized that I am a very stupidly skilled, competent copy editor, despite my natural reservations to be one, because I don't believe that the English language should be policed, but I know all the police's rules. And I did not say that in grammatically correct way, by the way. Um, so speaking of commas, so the thing that I hate the most, and I don't know why this bothers me, because it's all bullshit. And I think it's okay to say that it's all bullshit because all the rules are made up, right? You are following rules that people have made up for the English language, even though there's a number of vernaculars and variations and dialectics and things like that. Um, but the thing that annoys me the most is when people incorrectly use they use commas between adjectives where they don't belong, or don't use commas between adjectives where they do. And I don't know why this is a pet peeve, because it's quite silly. But there are differences between something called a coordinate and a cumulative adjective. And I will see a lot of times where people will put things that are coordinate adjectives, and they'll put commas between them. And that's like, great, right? Then you have a cumulative adjective set, and there will be commas between things that don't need them. So if I said I had a fast red car, and you put a comma between red and fast, it annoys the shit out of me. I don't know why.
So the rule, right, is that adjectives that are in like the same category of adjective
Yeah.
need to have commas, but if they're in different categories of adjective, they don't need to have commas.
Exactly. And it is one of those things that if you're a native English speaker, you naturally learn the cadence of our language. So you know when you are building a descriptor, what goes naturally in what order. Because you wouldn't say I have a fast red car for the most part. You would say I have a red fast car, or something like that. Or you would
Yeah, there's a prescribed order for every single one.
I
yeah,
am
but
certain that I am doing this
Fast
wrong
red
in my
car, fast red
writing.
car.
I am 100% certain I'm misusing commas in this way.
I mean, it shouldn't bother me because it is a dumb rule, right? And then there are vernaculars where things are put in different order, and it's not a big deal. But for whatever reason, that just like sits in my brain, and I'm like, no, you're doing it wrong.
All right, now, I am going to come out in defense of rules, right? And then we're going to spend the rest of this time bitching about them. It's fine, but I'm going to come out in defense of rules. And the reason we have the rules is to make things clear. And if your misuse of grammar is making it so that your readers can't understand your story, that's a problem. If your use of grammar, correct grammar, is making it so your readers cannot understand or enjoy your story, then that is also a problem.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come out in defense of rules. I'm also going to plug my own Writer's Lunch series that I did last year, a 3-part series on grammar rules, where we went through the entire Chicago Manual of Style, and it is I tried to make it as fun as I could. I'll just say that.
Not fun. I want to throw this out there as well with his and this is because I'm on more the literary bent of things, but playing with language, I especially poetry, but examples like Irvine Welsh's Train Spotting, where it's written all in dialogue with no quotation marks before end because it almost exclusively is. And in a heavy Scottish dialect. You can get
Interesting.
into how a vibe is going by repetition. You can break these rules that we're talking about if you're, let's say, insistent enough with them that this is how we're going to read this thing. But you're basically
Yeah.
teaching someone a way to read differently in the context of your book. So that's one way I think that the stupid grammar rules can be excessively broken, and you have to be so incredibly insistent that this is not a rule right now while you're reading this book.
Yeah, for this particular thing. And one of the things that I just want to blanket say, because we mostly work with genre fiction authors, I'm not working with a physician who's running a clinical trial and needs to put their data in a very clear and specific scientific format using AP style for readability and then also followability to like get their research verified by somebody doing the same research. Like there are instances where you actually do need your grammar to be impeccable. And when you are writing fiction, you just don't have the same stakes, right? Like you just simply don't. As much as we love our books and as much as we love our craft, because when I do a good job at a copy edit, I'm not like, oh, this was stupid. No, this is great. But one of the most important things for your story, especially if you're making up new words or new worlds, or you're using words in a very different way than they're used right now, especially if you have like, a language that you've created or a dialect that you've created, all that jazz. The main thing, the most important thing is that if you have something in your book, you do it consistently. So every time it looks the same way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a client that used American English for everything except for one particular word. And we talked about it, we went back and forth on it, and I was like, great, I'm gonna put it in your style sheet that this word is in the British version. And that as long as you're using it consistently in your whole book and your whole series, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is weird.
Yeah.
I
But
definitely
yeah, Shannon, what you were talking about, it's the difference between like formal and informal writing, where like when you have like a legal document or like a scientific paper or some sort of, medical document, those are like instances of formal writing where you
Mhm.
have to be like so careful to make sure you are saying exactly what you mean in the entirely correct way that it can't be misinterpreted.
I
Yeah.
mean, all
Versus
of
like,
the modern understanding of the Second Amendment hinges on a comma,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And then like, whereas like fiction is a more informal style of writing where, you want to follow the rules that like Daphne said, that make the writing clear for your readers, that make, what you're saying is understandable to your readers, but it's not so important to be absolutely precisely impeccable. But, still uh
You
you
want
don't
it to
want
look
yourself.
polished, but you shouldn't make yourself insane trying to write in a
Right,
certain way that follows a bazillion rules. And
right.
Sean kind of explained, I don't know how much we want to go into it, but there are a number of rules that people talk about, like having the preposition at the end of the sentence and like not splitting your infinitives, that really come down to racism. And that were interjected into our language as rules back, I believe, at the beginning of the 1900s. I mean, it might have been the late 1800s, because one man did not like the fact that foreigners were coming into America and into Britain, and the languages were changing, and we're trying to make all language be more like Latin. And so
But
made rules that weren't applicable even at that time
yeah.
to try to make sure essentially that the African dialects and stuff were considered poor and uneducated.
Mhm.
But
So English does not have a governing body. French does. French does have a governing body, and it's super interesting. And they're the the people who speak French most are not in France. They're in Africa, in countries that were formerly colonized by France. And so there's a movement in those countries, a patriotic movement to misuse French, and to make it their own, in a way that abuses it outside of like the official French system. And I find that really interesting.
But you know, no matter what grammar rules you are using or not using in your informal writing, you don't want to mix up peak, peak, and peak because those are three different words that are all spelled differently and have different meanings. And so if you're mixing up peak, peak, and peak, your readers are going to have a hard time understanding what you're talking about.
You know which one though, does get me. If you find yourself using whom unironically, I in fiction, in genre fiction specifically, I assume literary could be a little bit different, but like, for my genre fiction, if I find someone is using whom or is using semicolons, my first thought is just like, oh, because you never have to use a semicolon. You never have to use one.
I understand it's two sentences, but I've read way too much philosophy. Like, yeah, an entire paragraph, a 2-page paragraph that is 2 sentences. You need the semicolons, yeah.
No.
Okay, so I got the John Dryden era wrong. His was the 1700s. It was earlier than I thought, but you can look up John Dryden. He was a literary critic, and came up with a lot of the snooty BS that you're having to deal with. I actually like semicolons. And I think we've actually had this discussion a little bit in our Discord. But one of the things that Daphne has pointed out is that semicolons often get used incorrectly, and that's obnoxious as crap, if you know how they're supposed to be used. And so I think if you use them, cool. I don't think you necessarily have to be as judicious as most people are, but just be aware people exist out here, whichever direction Daphne is on your screen. Not by them. But there are some legitimate ways that people don't realize that you can use a semicolon. And I had to do this recently for something that was nonfiction. If you make a list that has multiple elements inside of one facet of that list, you probably want to separate everything in that list with semicolons to make it clear where that one facet that has multiple objects inside of it represents a singular instance. So if I said, today I had to run to the store, buy eggs, milk, and flour, and pick up my kid from school, that would be so many commas. But if I said I had to run to the store, semicolon, buy eggs, comma, milk, comma, and flour, comma, or actually semicolon, apologies, and pick up my kid from school, that actually represents, a clearer picture of what I was doing. And so like, that's one of the instances where I will argue with you. I actually think it looks cleaner. And maybe this is because I come from a background that also includes, technical bullshit. Where that absolutely is necessary. I feel like you should be doing that. And I don't see people do that enough in general life. And then their lists are very confusing. Or they decide like, I can't write the list or I can't write the sentence like this because there's no way to do it without an extra 15 commas for whatever I'm talking about.
Yeah, and see, that's where I would say, yeah, you can reword it. Reword. If my clients like semicolons, I leave them in if that is their preference, as long as they're using them correctly. It's just I prefer my fiction semicolonless. Susan in the chat had said maybe if a character is using whom, and that's funny because it makes me think of a book that Anna and I both read relatively recently. And the character is a stickler for grammar, and it is 100% a character trait, him using whom correctly.
He's like the only one in the whole book that does it.
Yeah, he's the only one in the whole
That's
book that does
funny.
it.
I think that's a very interesting thing that she just sort of talked about, is that using different types of grammar or the amount of pretentiousness in the way that the character structures their talk is a way to like use those elements of the rules to create character voice. And I think that's one of those like I wouldn't necessarily say that's like advanced. I think that's probably like intermediate writing level skill. But it's something to think about as you go in and start writing your characters and you do your dialogue, or if you're doing things from certain POVs, like ways that you can change the voice up is by changing either the order of events in your sentences, or by using slightly different word choices to fit the BS grammar rules. So if you can never use a preposition at the end of the sentence because this person is a little bit more hoity-toity, then in their section they never do, but other characters can. That's a great way
As
to.
well as, oh God, we got so much crap for this in high school. I had a big stickler of a grammar teacher, and she would insist on grammar being correct even within dialogue, which is absurd, right? Using your like your commas and all that correctly, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the way the sentence is structured or using incomplete sentences, which is a huge part of how people actually talk.
Yeah.
And so she would insist on it being correct, even though that's not how dialogue, all the rules go out the window when you're talking about dialogue.
Yeah. That's a really good way to make your dialogue sound really stilted, is
Mhm.
making sure you're have impeccable grammar within the actual dialogue itself.
I have not heard enough from Ian, but I know Ian has a lot of thoughts when it comes to being a writer on grammar. Because
Yeah.
maybe a year and a half ago, he wrote a very strongly, not worded, but very emotional blog.
Emotional. Emotional.
Calm down, sir. You're too emotional.
Too
Okay.
emotional.
You were, what's a better way? Passionate. You can
Yeah.
call it passionate, right?
Yeah, yeah. I have strong feelings about, like I said, like as a writer, I tend to break rules more often than I follow them. And so I'm pretty like, I like, if somebody, like Daphne had said, if somebody had uh you know if my teacher had been like trying to make me do dialogue with like strict grammar, I'd be pretty upset, because it's like, that's not, again, that's not how people speak, right? That's not what they do in general. And so I'm a pretty big proponent of, one, knowing the rules and then breaking them afterwards, because I feel like a lot of times rules are just kind of dumb.
Yeah, if you know what the rules are, then you can break them
Yeah.
smartly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that my general opinion has always been, fuck the rules, but be aware of them. Because they do, unfortunately, for better or for worse, most people know the rules, and so like they can kind of, even if they can't like articulate it and tell you what rules you're breaking, they can detect in writing what feels
This
wrong.
is this is like learning to make music or learning art as well. You have to
Yeah.
know the rules in order to break them. If you see some abstract painting, that person should be able to be pretty darn good at figure drawing, and then they go do that. And it teaches you a lot to learn the rules in order to break them.
Yeah.
Some people in punk bands in the late 70s were absolutely trained musicians.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about that before too with when I've talked about like genre expectations and like subverting tropes and things like that. It's important to know what the expectations are. Even like with tropes and genre expectations, like they're not strict rules, right? But it's the same kind of principle. It's important to know what they are so that you can like turn them on their head or break them or, violate them in a way that is both like intelligent and satisfying to the people who are interacting with your work.
So, are there rules that y'all have heard out there? And I have a number that I have, that are not real rules. And I mean, we've kind of talked about preposition stuff, but things that people have been told, as they write, that might suffocate them as writers because they've been given this rule about grammar or style, or line level elements that you're like, no, just throw that out the window.
Well, I mean, Ian mentioned the preposition thing,
Yeah.
but I see Sean put "don't use said" in the
Oh
chat.
God, I hate
That's
that
the one
one.
that I like. That's the first thing that came to mind. That is one of the biggest pieces of advice you hear all the time is like, don't use said, don't use said. It's a bad grammar tag or a bad dialogue tag, blah, blah, blah. Said is a perfectly acceptable, perfectly fine dialogue tag. And like in a lot of instances, it's actually like necessary. Because like when you're using like, oh, whispered and muttered and yelled and shouted and like, you know, all kinds of different dialogue tags, the reader gets uh like tired. Said
It's
is a
distracting
break.
too.
You know, sometimes people just say things, and that's perfectly fine. You know?
No, I
Yeah.
actually hear this from the other perspective a lot, and I think this is one of those things where it is a genre kind of thing, because YA in middle grade and even new adult often uses those like bombastic dialogue tags. So as you're saying, like whispered, muttered, exclaimed, screamed, those are much more often in genre fiction. And instead of being told don't say said, I hear people say, no, you shouldn't be saying that. You should be like using said, or you should be using like the information around that sentence, or the sentence should be able to stand alone. But there are a number of audiences, like they want you to give them the stage directions, essentially. They want you to provide them that, so they don't either because they're young and they need that as part of their reading comprehension, or just because it's a fun little like brain candy book and they want to be able to just flow through it. They don't necessarily want you to write in this totally different way. They want you to have somebody hiss a line that's 17 words long. I actually would fight that one.
Yes, but use those. I'm not gonna say sparingly, but like judiciously, right? Like you
Right.
don't need, if they really do just say something, you don't need to say uttered, right? Like you
Yeah.
can have
Yeah.
you can have them if they shout, sure, you can have them shout. You don't have to write in all caps or whatever.
You don't have to have them ejaculate.
Oh yeah, never use that one. That one's
That people
Yeah, you're
have
being very
used that.
quiet, but just so everybody who wasn't able to hear you say, like, you should not have them ejaculate because that has been used as a dialogue tag.
It has.
It is not a great dialogue tag.
It's so funny.
Now we as Tomeworks have agreed on a few things where we agree that we disagree with the official grammar rule as laid out by the Chicago Manual of Style. And so one of those things is the use of ellipses. We do love ellipses. I love ellipses. They're great for trailing sentences. Now the official way you're supposed to use them is there's a few ways that you can do it, right? So we have this way, which is the true correct way, which is to not have any spaces on either side of the ellipses. You could also write it with
Space in the front, a space.
space on either sides. I'm struggling to come up with sentences, but you can space on either sides. Now, Tomeworks uses what is my understanding. I thought like everybody did it this way until I learned that the rule was not this. We have one space on the other side of the ellipses. And we have agreed that this is how we do things because
This is a weird one for the Chicago Manual of Style because almost nobody uses this rule the way that they put it in fiction. I can't speak to the nonfiction, but I think this is a holdover from the way nonfiction does things, especially because they use ellipses a lot when they are closing down bracketed endings of quotes inside of nonfiction speech. So for clarity, I mean, if they are using a quotation from another book, they're citing something, and then you having the ellipses and then having a bracket and then the number of dots inside of that, and also the spaces can represent different things about that quote. So I think this is a holdover from that because there's a lot of real specific stuff that happens outside of fiction. And almost no publishing house does it the way the Chicago Manual of Style says to do it for fiction. So if you go pop to your bookshelf and you go pull open like something that was recently published by Del Rey, I think they do it the way we do.
The CMOS rule is no spaces, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And then again, it's because if you have a space inside of a bracket, it means a different thing than if you don't have a space inside of a bracket with the ellipses.
Yeah. I think Susan has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, all my software, if you use an ellipsis, changes the next word to a capital as if it's a new sentence.
Oh, that's frustrating.
That's
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. Every single one of the writing software I use is doing that now.
Huh.
I've
I've never experienced that myself using Word.
This is with AI and the way, Anna, I think you've experienced this in different ways. But with
Yeah.
AI as a autocorrect, it is absolutely changing what it's recommending and is still evolving. Like it's like half the system.
She's not wrong. My word is doing it too.
Yeah, they've integrated, so they've integrated generative AI into the spelling and grammar check in Word and in probably a lot of other word processors as well.
Yeah.
And yes, it has made the spelling and grammar checker shittier. It's actually like I'll find stuff in Word all the time that it's trying to get me to correct. That's not actually wrong. I post them in our Tomeworks editors group chat all the time when I see a ridiculous one that is trying to get me to change.
We
I think
did
one
a
of the most
whole
recent ones
quiz
I
on
was
that.
sorry, what?
We did a whole quiz on the
Yeah,
dumb
we
grammar
did.
checker.
Yeah, we did, yeah. I saw recently, I was working on a book for a client and Microsoft Word. So the sentence, it was talking about wizards, and it said something about the mage leader, so like the leader of this group of mages. And Microsoft Word wanted me to correct mage leader to manager, which was really dumb. So yeah,
Okay,
but like
I do have a question for you, Susan, because I'm fiddling inside of Word right now to see if I can duplicate it. If I use an ellipses that has an extra period, it does that. If I do the ellipses with no space behind the word before it, so I'm gonna. So this is an example sentence without a period at the end. But if I do it like this, it seems to be fine. If I do a space after the word, if I took a breath, space, and then put the ellipses in, it seems like it wants to capitalize, but it's doing it inconsistently, which is very
It happens to me if I use the ellipses right after the last word, but then put a space in, not 4 periods, just 3, and then a space, and then the next word is capitalized, and I don't even have grammar check on.
No, there's automatic grammar
Like
stuff.
Rhonda was talking about shutting it off. Mine is off. I don't have it on. These things are sometimes changing my sentences as I'm typing.
Mhm.
It's getting really annoying.
I think you can turn off a lot of the auto corrections that they do. I'd have to go into the Word
Yeah, you'd have
settings
to
to
go
try
in
to
and
figure it out, but I can look into it. If I can figure out how to turn off all of the auto corrections, I'll let you know, Susan.
Well, I'm using LibreOffice, so
Oh, okay.
I don't
That's
know.
also part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are more reasons every day to switch everything over to Linux, right?
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
So this is one of those things that kind of tells you why you actually may need a copy editor more in the AI era than you did before, because your word processor is fighting you. And that's obnoxious. Like, I can't believe that you're having to deal with this when all you want to do is be creative. And not just in this particular instance, but I feel like that happens a lot. Because like what Anna was saying, where, we're trying to do something creative and it wants to like pigeonhole you and sometimes will change your words without you realizing it as you type, so that your mage, I can't remember who's mage leader, but your mage leader is now the manager.
Yeah.
And that's not what you did. Or if you have a name that is unusual, so this is a BS one, but somebody was trying to be clever and their fantasy male character's name was Jehanathan instead of Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Yeah. And it was just what I mean. To me, I don't love the name. I think it's kind of silly, but doing something similar to a word or a name that exists now puts you at risk for having inconsistency in the character's name. And when the person is reading a book, they would be like, "Hey, these people grew up together. This is your brother. You know his name." And now the reader is judging you because this stupid error has shown up that wouldn't have shown up if the technology wasn't fighting you. And I feel like such an old person be like technology, but at the same time, like this is legitimately an issue that is like specific to this time frame.
This is why generative AI is bad, kids. This is why we don't like it. I mean, it's
I
not the only
was
reason we don't like it, but it's a reason why it's
I
bad.
was talking to someone about my job at one point, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm an editor." They're like, "Oh, dude, like, have you considered using AI to do your editing for you?" I was like, "Yeah, just about anything that someone's going to send me, AI has already looked at because it's in the grammar checker." So no, we're looking beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the oldest AI, and this was not generative AI, but the oldest technical AI program we have is spell checker. And I can't remember if it's in Word or if it was in the original pages that Mac was using, but that's what it was. It was a spell checker. They wrote it.
See, those older ones, they were based on like databases that were actually like maintained by people. And so like these databases that the old spell checkers and grammar checkers used were regularly like maintained and updated and checked by people, with
Mhm.
real thinking brains that could actually like, you know, uh uh make them actually function the way they're supposed to. And now they're not based on databases that are maintained and checked and, updated by real people. They're based on these databases that are, conglomerated by this AI
That
program
are
that is
scrounging
just
the
a
internet.
statistical model. So, like, you know, that's why they're worse now.
I'll bring up the Chinese room experiment again, which I love to when people are talking about AI. And just you need to have a human to check things because they don't understand what's going on. Just because it looks like they can does not mean they understand. But the Chinese room was a awesome thought experiment that predated AI, but absolutely tells you so much about how these processes work.
Mhm.
Okay, so I lost the plot here. I know we were talking about a specific question.
We were.
No, we were talking about ellipses, and then we were talking about, and then Susan brought up her problem, and then now we're on AI.
Yeah. Well, Susan, I'm so sorry you're running into that. I don't have enough background in LibreOffice to know why yours is doing it because LibreOffice is different than Word. But we'll look into it. Are you on our Discord? If not, we'll send you the link, but continue tapping on.
Yeah, I am. I am on there, but I can't remember what name I put on.
Okay.
It's not Susan.
Yeah, my husband uses LibreOffice, so maybe I can get on his computer and fiddle around and see what I can figure out.
Rhonda said there's a way to do it individually or something. So I guess
Mm,
I'll look and help.
All
yeah.
right, here's my other dumb rule that I really hate. All right. Um, I have to put it in the, all right, I am formatting it correctly right now. I hate this. I am okay with including punctuation and dialogue if it is part of the dialogue. If it is not part of the dialogue or sorry, including it in part of the quotations. If it's
Yeah.
not part of the quotations, it does not belong in there. It is absurd to me that that is the rule that I need to put the quotation around it no matter what. That
Yeah.
is obscene
Yeah, that's one that we also have in our Forge
in our
rules that
style
we have
guide. Yeah.
decided to violate because I agree. Like when you have a quotation in the middle of a sentence or at the end of a sentence, if the punctuation is part of the quotation, like if there's a comma in there, then yes, include it. But if the punctuation is not part of the quotation and it's part of like the sentence that surrounds it, it doesn't need to be in the quotation mark. It needs to be outside of the quotation mark. That just makes more sense. And
And
there are some
and
examples
again,
where
this is
like
about confusion,
yeah,
right?
I mean, and there are some examples where it's like literally confusing for the period or whatever punctuation to be inside the quotation mark versus outside. So
The thing that I akin this to is, as you said, like it's confusing, and other English speaking countries don't do it the same way we do for that specific reason. So if you were to look at British English, some of their grammatical rules when it comes to like the periods or the marks inside or outside of the quotation mark, they do it the opposite because it is less confusing and it is more accurate. I wish I knew why we did it differently, or when that changed, but we do. We just simply do. And it's silly because it is less precise. Single versus double quotes. This is a confusing one. This is one that I rebelled against when I started learning about it. And I think we may have a specific rule in our stuff too about this one. I don't remember if we did change the rule to be more in line with what publishers often do when it comes to single versus double quotes, or quotes within quotes is usually where this shows up. Because most of us, when we look at a book that has, say, someone remembering something somebody else said but isn't actually said, we'll see it done as a single quote. Technically, it's supposed to be a double quote regardless, and that single quotes only exist inside of a parent quote of double quotations.
This is a convention that is used all the time in fan fiction to kind of soften the quote. Like, this is not a true direct quote no one is speaking right now. And so they'll use the single quotes as like, this is a thought or this is a remembrance. And that is one that I think that's a good use of them.
Yeah. But technically that's incorrect based upon the Chicago manual style. And again, this is another one where if you go to a larger house that actually publishes their house style guide, they don't do it the way the Chicago manual style says to do it, because it does. It's harsher, and it's also not the convention for most fiction, even though it's in the side of the style guide. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, there's these hard, fast rules that are not actually hard and fast rules, even though there may be, people telling you they are, simply because like people who are professionals just decide not to do it. And so for clarity, because I think we didn't explain this, but a style guide is something that is either your resource, like the Chicago manual style, but if you're working for a press, they may have a house style guide, meaning that they've created their own rules that every book that they publish is supposed to follow. And your copy editor is supposed to also follow that if they work for that house and you are, publishing with that house. So the rules that they follow are there. Someone else may have another guide somewhere else with different rules in it. They don't have to follow that guide. They're supposed to follow whichever one follows the house. So as an editing collective, we have our own kind of house rules that we follow that are actually more in line with the publishing industry for your genre fiction, and then also like mystery or romance or whatever, versus what the Chicago manual style says. So it's like this very confusing thing that if you haven't published before, sounds ridiculously labyrinthian, but it does make sense for us because we want your stuff to look professional, and professional doesn't necessarily follow the guide that Chicago has laid out. I just made that worse, didn't I?
No, that's pretty much it. Although it is worthwhile. Sometimes we have clients that have quirks, grammatical quirks.
Mhm.
And they feel very strongly about them. And so we will recommend what we know as publishing standard or a publishing norm, especially if you are trying to pursue traditional publishing. Self-publishing has a lot more wiggle room. But if you're trying to pursue traditional publishing and you have a grammatical quirk that you are really sticking to, like, we will advise you. Someone might have a problem with this somewhere down the road, right? An agent might not pick it up because it's weird. A publisher, same reason. And you don't really want to get into friction with your publisher in that sense. But if it is truly something that you think is important to the style of your book, of course, we're going to honor that because that is what your creative license is for.
Yeah. One of the things that a good editor, if you are looking for an editor, maybe it's not us, that's great. Go find someone that works for you. But one of the important things is to actually have either a conversation or a form that you fill out or something so that they know what your quirks are, right? Like you need to have a conversation so that when you get their edit back, that you're not upset that they've made all these changes that don't align with your vision. And so a good editor will have that as part of their process. A good editor will lead that process so that you are not put into that position. Another thing that is not always consistent with freelance editors, but that we do and that I suggest you find someone that will do this is that they will create a style sheet for your book. And that means that when they're done with their edit, you get an actual like form. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can just be like, just these are the words that are in your story that aren't real words. Or, when you come into the situation with the different kinds of quotes, this is how we address them. And that way, if you're writing a series or if you're writing, multiple books and you want them all to be kind of the same, because they're in the same universe, but they're not necessarily connected or whatever. Like if you want that consistency, but you're not going to end up with that same editor again, the new editor has the framework, right? They have this style rule sheet for your book specifically. Not all editors will do that, but it's something that I think is important for like continuity and polish and blah, blah, blah. So it's something that I advocate for and, that our editing collective does because we all recognize like the actual intrinsic value of that for you, even if we think that a lot of rules are silly in general, not necessarily your rules. But it's super useful. It's good for you because again, the most important thing is that your rules are consistent for you. And if you make up a rule and you use it consistently in your self-publishing, you might get pushback from audience members who are sticklers, but the most important thing is it's consistent and that people essentially learn your language as they read and that endears them to you. Off my soapbox.
I think we have a few minutes left. I think we have time for probably one more question. Do we have another question on our list that we want to get to?
Okay, so I think we might have covered some of these, but there might be some that y'all wanted to talk about. But are there obscure rules that are real that people don't often know that you think they should?
N dashes, EN dashes.
Mm.
Those
Versus hyphens.
Yeah. Versus there's there's 5 members, but there's 3 members of the dash family: the hyphen, the N dash, and the M dash, and then British use a even more. And an N dash you almost never encounter, but there's an important distinction. When you are hyphenating names, so if my friend is Elizabeth Lloyd Davies, that is one last name and it is hyphenated. It's got a hyphen in it. That is very different from the Myers-Briggs score or Myers-Briggs personality type, which is 2 people's names that have been hyphenated because we are naming a concept after them. That uses an N dash. You will never, if no publisher, no editor will ever hold it against you if you don't put an N dash where you're supposed to. They will fix it for you. But
unless you are writing nonfiction.
if you're writing nonfiction, then you really know these things. But
you actually
yes,
talk about Myers-Briggs and get flayed for using the wrong type of dash.
things that use N dashes. It's such, the N dash itself is just such a mysterious creature. I love it.
But that shows you why there is a silly but very important distinction, because if you're using the context clues of that dash, one of them means this is a single person with this particular last name that's been hyphenated. And the other one means this is 2 people who have, for whatever reason, become considered one entity for a concept, a philosophy, or a technology, whatever. But it means 2 totally different things. One of the things that Anna, because I've dominated this conversation, apologies. Anna, anybody else, do y'all have weird rules that you think people should know more about?
Weird rules.
Weird rules.
We've talked about commas. I honestly, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there are.
Shannon, if you have one, you can give poor Anna more time to think.
So one of the things that I'll see every once in a while is that we're still on the dashes. People will use M dashes and like as in a serial way where they'll have like an aside quote and then an aside quote within the side quote and then another aside quote inside the side quote. You actually aren't supposed to do that. You're only supposed to use like one M dash per sentence or one internalized like M dash quotation or aside, excuse me. So like don't put 7 asides nested inside of each other because that's technically not correct. And I wish people knew that, because if you have to do that many asides, either this should be a joke that you are writing with intentionality, because that makes sense to me. But if you were doing that much, it means that you have impregnated this sentence with tumors, and
Now
you
I want to write that as a writing style just to use it. One rule that I break all the time because I find it really stupid is you're not supposed to put more than one sentence inside of parentheses. And I like to do that.
Yeah, I also like to do that.
I don't like using parentheses in fiction. Like really at all.
I love
I can't even
parentheses.
think of a time that I've used parent because like usually if I'm trying to do something that is sort of like a parenthetical, I do it a little bit. I just kind of like separate it out by like, paragraphs or sentences. I
but
don't
it's
know why that is. I just don't really like using parentheses in fiction.
it's
It's very
convention.
interesting. From my understanding, neurodivergent people tend to love parentheses because all of our thoughts come with little bonus content on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. But I mean, the general thing, like you look at fiction, you don't see very many parentheses. That's why we don't put our parentheticals in there. But it's not wrong. It's not actually wrong.
No, and I think that is a quirk of my particular writing style is to use a lot of parentheses. I use them a little bit like how Terry Pratchett uses footnotes, which is the correct way to use footnotes. Footnotes are fun. Footnotes are and should be fun.
Okay, another thing that I see people use wrong, and it is a comma, so y'all can like knock me out of here if you want. If you are naming a person after introducing them, so if you say like my wife and you don't use a comma, this indicates you have more than one wife.
Yeah, that one's an obscure one. That
Yeah.
is an obscure one for sure.
That's one that I follow when I'm like writing, but when I'm
Mhm.
like when I'm writing like a story, I do follow that rule. But when I'm just uh like, typing an email to somebody, I don't really follow that as well.
I
I don't
follow it depending on clarity, right? Because if they're listing out stuff like he was traveling to the lake with um Ashley, John, um his wife, June, and their son, right? Then that comma is very misleading, right? You need to not have that comma because is his wife June or is and this is another one that could totally be solved by rewording things, but it is very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm capitalized wife that second time. But yeah, this is one that I love seeing mistaken because of the fact that it's confusing. But there are times just like you guys where like I'll be doing the writer's lunch stuff and I'll be creating someone's biography and I'll mess this up and I'll see it 3 weeks later and be like, oh, but
Yeah.
it's generally speaking not a big deal. Except that, just this little tiny little thing
And
where,
it's
sorry,
sorry,
what's that?
sorry.
Okay, so this actually ruined a mystery for me because they
Oh,
did it the right way.
there was two wives.
It was actually a sibling, and so we didn't know about the third sibling in the story, but that third sibling was the one that was like murdering everybody, but they used the comma the right way, so I knew that there was another sibling somewhere.
No.
Well,
That's a twist.
That's a fun one.
So that's also because it's not just when you're introducing someone either. Like if
No,
you're
I mean, anytime that you're like
you're
you're
naming
using actual
someone.
naming commit, yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of annoys me, like, because if you're writing a sentence, like, thank you, Shannon, you're supposed to say thank you, comma, Shannon. I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here. If I'm typing to Shannon in the group chat, I'm not gonna sit here and put a comma between thank you and Shannon. I'm just gonna type thank you, Shannon. You know what I mean? Like,
There is
but
also a
that's
big
technically
difference
rude.
between and Word gets on my ass about this all the time. I'm going to put some examples in here. these are said very differently in my brain, right? And I
Yeah.
know that of course is supposed to be set
It's an
off with a
interjection,
comma.
so you have to put the comma.
But that doesn't feel right because of course I took my dog is not the same as of course I took my dog. Like those are not the same thing. And so I abuse this one just for the vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a little bit past time, but there are instances where I also like agree. Like you don't want a comma somewhere that gives the impression of a break. And there's actual linguists who will argue about this because one of the things that people have started doing that I saw a lot, especially with editors that I'm seeing like go away, is that they would go hi, comma person's name at the beginning of the email because that was technically correct, even though we really never separated the original like address of hello, hi, whatever, as being separate from the name, even though we do that at the end of a letter, like with regards, comma, blah, 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 the other person's name. So like, what is the real rule? And the real rule is really what like makes the most sense. But go back and check the next time you get emails from real people and see how they open their emails because that looks so silly to me, but it's technically correct.
Technically, yeah, I will never open with a hi, comma, Daphne, comma. It will just be hi, Daphne, comma. That's it. Because yeah, I know that it's technically correct to put the comma before Daphne, but it feels stupid because that's not how I would say. I wouldn't say hi, Daphne. I would say hi, Daphne. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's what we can learn from this is that, some things are stupid. And it may not necessarily be that they're stupid in all instances, but when taken, to a logical conclusion, may make something super goofy. And it's okay to recognize that. And it's also okay not to know all the rules, right? Like some of the rules are made up. Some of the rules are not actually applicable, but people try to tell you that you have to use them anyway. Some of the rules change over time because the language changes. And some of the rules are obscure and super important. And that's why you should have other people check your work. But generally speaking, you shouldn't let grammar stop you from being creative. There are people out there who can help, especially if you have issues with grammar or haven't looked into grammar rules in a long time, especially like, if you went to school like mumble number of decades ago, and haven't revisited and the language has kind of moved into different directions than what you were taught. It's not a big deal. Just write. We're here to help you. And if you do want a refresher, I'm going to look up the book's name. I don't want you to feel like I am pandering to you, but there is a version of Dreyer's English for young readers. It's adapted for young readers, is what it says. But if you have not looked into grammar rules or really written in a long time, but you want to get into writing, this is actually a very easy way to reorient yourself to some of the most common rules, as well as like how things may have changed over time since you learned the rules originally. And then also it's really good for telling you when the rules are stupid, which I absolutely appreciate in somebody who is like the subject matter expert, who says, okay, these are things that people fight about, and it's dumb. Just do it this way. Eat Shoots and Leaves is very good as well. Dreyer's English came out more recently, about 3 years ago for the adolescent one, and I think 5 years ago for the one for adults. The adult one is much harder to get into. That's for people like us over here, in my opinion. But go grab this book if you really want to get some good advice on grammar rules and things like that. But don't let somebody piss you off into not writing or scare you off of writing by putting limitations based on grammar. That's the sign of somebody who should not be your friend because they're not helpful.
all right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We hope to see you at Writers Lunch this coming Thursday. And if you're in the Houston area, we also have a meetup on Monday at Melange Creperie in the Heights for our monthly science fiction and fantasy authors social. So cool. All right. Bye, everybody.